Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fun, fancy, and happy episode of Back to Basics, which is not at all as depressing as the last one. God, I hope. I remain to be Pastor Don because last episode did not yet kill me, and joining me is the amazing Courtney Fraley.
Hi.
You know, I keep making all these fun gestures, but I never know if, like, the final recording is going to put your video where I'm actually pointing to or not. So I might look like I'm just gesturing like a madman.
You're above me in my current view, so.
Yeah, you're to my left, so we'll see how it shakes out in the end.
Wibbly wobbly, something.
Yeah, wibbly wobbly. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and get ourselves into some more of that sweet, sweet Genesis. So today we are working through Genesis chapter 30, verses 25 out to the end. In the NRSVUE, it's entitled Jacob Prospers at Laban's Expense. Our subtitle for this episode is The One in Which Pastor Don Realizes the Thing He Said Last Episode May Have Actually Been Wrong. So, you want to read it for us, Courtney?
Yeah, sure. When Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know very well the service I have given you." But Laban said to him, "If you will allow me to say so, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I will give it." Jacob said to him, "You yourself know I have served you, and how your livestock have fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also?" He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again feed your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and such shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen." Laban said, "Good, let it be as you have said." But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob was pasturing the rest of Laban's flock. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and pine, Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plain and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the rods. He set the rods that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the rods. So the flocks produced young that were striped, speckled, and spotted. Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and the completely black animals in the flock of Laban, and put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob laid the rods in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the rods. But for the feebler of the flock, he did not lay them there, so the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man grew exceedingly rich and had large flocks and male and female slaves and camels and donkeys. Wow, that is like going into fine detail to be like, here is the minute detail in which one man screwed over another for what fucking reason?
So you remember
why?
You remember in the last episode when I said we were thousands and thousands of years away from the invention of genetics? Well, shit. Here comes Jacob proving me wrong on this shit. And that's pretty much exactly what he does, is he fucks Laban over with genetics. Now, at this time, it would have just simply been called animal husbandry. So I guess I could technically argue I'm still correct. But yeah, that's pretty much exactly what's happening.
No, animal husbandry is basic like intuitive genetics.
Yeah.
You were genetically modifying an organism by the way that you breed it. I want some of you to take a second and take that in. This is the way we live. Sorry, I'm with Steve. I take issue with people who are like, GMOs. Like, dude,
genetics earth. You don't want to eat GMO.
Some of it. Like pick the things. Like go after
Don't
Monsanto
let
making
me
stuff
tell you where
impossible
broccoli
to breed.
comes from, okay? Like broccoli isn't broccoli
Yeah,
isn't
don't ask
real.
for broccoli or kale or cauliflower or
Yeah, none of those are real.
Brussels
Like they're all
sprouts.
genetically modified.
Yep.
Or do you want to eat a non-GMO banana? They're basically like this big and all seeds. So it's a thing. Anywho, I think like there's a lot that's happening here, but mostly it's just Jacob deciding to fuck over Laban on his way out the door. For those of you who didn't follow, because a lot of this is legalese, for lack of a better term for the period. So the basic arc of what happens here is Jacob decides, all right, it's time for me to go off and do my own thing. I'm going to go be my own tribe now. I'm
ready.
Yeah, our amoebas are separating. And I am
it's my time.
I'm gonna go up and do my own thing. And there's the whole legalistic exchange between the two of them. God has blessed me through you, yada yada. It's ancient legal language. The establishment of covenants and stuff was all done in that way. So this is kind of legal language of separation that's happening here. And they're basically negotiating the terms of separation. And what they settle on is basically, all right, you'll take this chunk of the flock and you'll go over here, and then I'll take my chunk of the flock and go over here, and then there'll be a period of time where the flocks are going to just fuck, and then any new production that looks like it's mine will then be shipped to me and vice versa. And then after a time when the flocks are sufficiently heterogeneous, then we'll go on our separate ways. Animal husbandry as a means of covenant separation is basically what it is. And where Jacob gets the upper hand here is rather than just simply setting a
You've been watching the flocks, so we figured out this is how you get the speckly ones, huh?
Yeah, he watched goats fuck for a while and figured out what to do. So that he did, and this is like in these covenant styles at the time, to do this kind of separation, you'd name a number in the negotiation. Give me X number of sheep and goats and what have you. And Jacob doesn't do that. He does it by physical trait, which is an abnormal way of doing that. And what's more is he chooses a particular set of traits that are not common. So like speckled or brown or black sheep, like those are recessive traits. They're not common traits. Jacob, of course, knows here, recessive or not, like a sheep is still a sheep, whether it's white or brown. So it doesn't really much matter. It's just simply a trait. So he uses that to select them, gets them all off to the side, and has them start breeding. And result being that you do still get some of the predominant trait produced in the first few generations, and those get shipped back, but the majority are of the recessive trait. So thus endeth the genetics lessons for the day. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. That's the basic arc of what happens here. And yeah, Jacob comes out on top with this shit in a very clear way. So having given the run through now, what are your thoughts?
I do think it's hilarious that this is clearly like verse 37 onward is just like, here's how to, you can easily scientifically reproduce what Jacob is doing here. Here is his this chapter reads like a lab report.
Well, that may well be the intent, but I'm going to read this selection out of Alter's commentary here, where they're talking about verse 38 in particular. He says, the mechanism of Jacob's ingenious scheme has long perplexed commentators. At least on the surface, it appears to involve the age-old belief that sensory impressions at the moment of conception affect the embryo. Here, the peeled rods with their strips of white against the dark bark would impart the trait of spots or brindle markings to the offspring conceived. The same effect would then be achieved for the sheep by making them face the flocks of speckled goats during their own mating time. Yehuda Felix, an authority on biblical flora and fauna, has proposed that the peeled rods are only a dodge, a gesture to popular belief, while Jacob is actually practicing sound principles of animal breeding. Using a Mendelian table, Felix argues that the recessive traits would have shown up in about 25% of the animals born in the first breeding season, and so on and so forth. It's noteworthy, they says at the end, that Jacob makes no mention of the peeled rods when in the next chapter he tells his wife how he got the flocks. So the likely scenario here is that, at least according to Alter, the whole peeled rods and all that other stuff is him kind of putting on a show for Laban. Oh, that's how I did. When really all he was doing was practicing basic husbandry and genetics. Trying to get himself as many of them spotted animals as he could, and it works. So we get here our first impression of Jacob as a showman, which will come back later in the creation of a Technicolor Dreamcoat for his son. But that's for a later story and or musical. Should we do a musical episode? We should do a musical episode, shouldn't we?
I can sing, but should I?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Anyway, so that's the general arc of it. It's just basically legal trickery and a handful of good genetics. But did anything else jump out at you with this one?
God, at some point, but it just went off the road.
It does do that.
Hang on.
It is noting that the first thing he says, give me my wives and my children for whom I've served you, that I may go, for you know the service I've done to you. Like, there is an element of possession transfer that's happening here that doesn't just mean the livestock, because the wives and the children are also considered property of the household in that way. So, like, he's asking Laban, my wives and my children, give to me, please. Make them my property now, because they are technically your property because you are the patriarch.
Yeah.
So there's that exchange. And then there's also, which I'm guessing you might jump on that at some point, verse 27. For I have learned by divination.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm so accustomed to that kind of stuff being in the Bible, and gradually learning the actual intent is rather interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll bite.
Allow me to read you the exact same passage from Alter's translation. It says as follows: and Laban said to him, if pray I have found favor in your eyes, I have prospered, and the Lord has blessed me because of you. And he said, name your wages and I will give them to you. Or name your wages that I may give them. That's the time. No mention of divination anywhere in there. So that is not something that is rooted in the text. So I'm going to do the unusual, well, not unusual for me, but I'm going to do the bit where I bring up the Hebrew here of 27 and see if we can find anything that looks like divination. Favor, oh, bless me, I've learned by experience. Yeah, not a damn thing that seems to suggest divination here.
So why is it in there? Even in this version, this is the version of the Bible you suggest reading, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best one we have here. Now,
then why did they? What's with the divination thing if it's not there in the Hebrew?
This is, I think we have nahas, I think is our verb at play. Yeah, there it is. There it is. The verb nahas is what is generally translated in the King James. It's translated as I have learned by experience. But certain later readers, American translations started talking about this as divination, and so they kind of entered into random lexicon as having a divination, an enchantment aspect to it. And the KJV itself translates this as divination often enough, because learning by experience and divination are kind of not dissociated in the ancient world. So what we're having here is a question of, is he talking about the magical art of divination, or is he talking about learning by experience? The simple answer to that, I would say, is he's not about learning by experience. Like, this is one where I disagree with the NRSVUE very, very firmly, because what we have here is contract language. So the idea of this being something mystical doesn't seem like it fits with the definition of what's happening here. So yeah, I do disagree with the NRSVUE on its translation here. It doesn't make sense to me to talk about this as divination. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanna pick at with this guy here? Like it's a surprisingly straightforward little bit of text here, but there is a lot that happens. Mostly
I fear that I know the answer.
okay.
What? Why? This guy, Laban, he's like, I'll give you anything to stay. And then, like, when he's like, well, I'm going to be leaving anyway. So here's what I would like you to give me. And he's like, done. All right. And then he screws him over. Jacob screws him over. Why? Is it just because this family are assholes?
Well,
Like,
let's look at a couple of pieces to this first. First off, Jacob and Laban do not have the best of relationship. Remember that he fucked them over about wives not too long ago. Like, Laban has not been averse to fucking Jacob over. Literally, when it comes down to fucking. Admittedly, Jacob's not good at identifying women, so he kind of played himself with that one. But you know, Laban definitely pulled a fuck over on him. And I want to remind you that what we're having here, the whole name your price and it's yours sort of language, this isn't literal. This is kind of ritualistic contract language. The typical form here would be to say, name what you want and it's yours, and then he'll name something, and then he'll negotiate, and there'll be a back and forth. Where Jacob got the upper hand is he named something that Laban wouldn't give a shit about getting rid of. Like, yeah, all the speckled and spotted and brown sheep and shit, like, that's all, that's it, that's all you, sure, why the hell not, right? Like, it seems to Laban in that moment to be a win-win. Because, okay, you leave, and you take the shit that I don't want with you. Like, I'm aware this is a negotiation, you can imagine Laban thinking, but I don't see a downside to this. I mean, you did have trouble identifying women to their face while your penis was out. Maybe you're just that stupid. And so Laban goes for it. And then Jacob plays him with that hard. So what you're seeing here isn't a case of as much of a case of Jacob fucking over Laban because he was totally being generous. He wasn't being generous to him. Like, he was laying the groundwork for a standard contractual negotiation in a relationship where he has a history of fucking over people who are in contractual relationships with him. So I'm kind of a little bit team Jacob on this one.
all right, fair enough.
All right. So yeah, that's pretty much all it is here. Is this?
But this half of a chapter taken out of context.
Yeah, taken out, and that's like, we will come back to this with the Bible constantly. Anything taken out of context can tell a very different story. This out of context tells the story of Jacob's an asshole, which, you know, okay, fair. But also maybe not in this specific instance. Like, this is kind of him getting back on the whole Leah and Rachel thing. Keeping in mind that the intermediary chapter was them basically competitively child breeding him. Like, dude's tired. I imagine. Like,
I'm tired.
I'm tired. I'll have a nap. Then fire the missiles. Sorry, very, very old internet reference for those of you who are as old as I am. Anything else you wanna dig into on this guy? Again, fairly short text, but you know, straightforward, I think.
No, I think that's pretty much it for me.
All right. So as I pointed out, we are starting to make our way into the story of Jacob as an independent agent. We've got we're going to have a reconciliation with Esau before too long. Laban's going to come back a couple of points. There'll be some back and forth. We will eventually, and I think we're getting into chapter 31. I'm looking ahead. I think it's chapter 35, maybe. Yeah, chapter 35, where we get that fateful wrestling match. So we'll have plenty of warning for you to get in all your WW whatever gear. So, you know, you get a couple pile drivers and be a fun episode. But in the meantime, we have the back and forth with Laban. We have Jacob. We have all of that, and there's a lot to happen. So if there's nothing else, let's go ahead and call it then for today. If you've made it this far, as usual, thank you very much for sticking with us. I'm pleased to announce I don't believe this was as depressing as our last episode. It was mostly just Jacob being a wise ass, which, you know,
I have something I'd like to tack onto that episode after we're done with this one, if you don't mind, actually.
all right. So anyway, if you're still with us, thank you for sticking around, and check out all of our various links below. The Discord's popping, the church is doing its thing. And if Courtney asks you to, wilt thou
Like, share, and subscribe.
Please do those things, because they are helpful things to us, and the more views we get, the closer we get to making this feel like a legitimate thing what we're doing. So
We try.
if only for the sake of our own poor floundering egos, please pass it around the internets a little bit. Other than that, come join our community. We're a loving bunch of crazy folk, and we'll be happy to see you. If you're in Japan, we got an address. You can come hang out. Otherwise, yeah, check in with you next week, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.